Okay, perfect. I think we're good to go.
Alrighty then.
They can hear me. So, perfect. Awesome. That is great news. Excited to hear it. Let's see. You said it was episode 256. No, it's not.
257, actually, sir. 257.
Oh. I think it's showing. Yeah, it's 256 showing on the website.
We'll fix that later. Once again, folks, as you know, the technological illiterate over here, we are just trying to make do with what we can. But it is what it is. So tonight, either 256 or 257, we're not 100% sure. I'll figure it out after the fact. No. Either way, tonight's episode is a requested episode. A fellow reached out to us here, and here is what we have. Hi, I made the comment, blah, 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 blah. I really enjoy your shows, blah, 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 blah. I'm wondering if you guys would consider a show idea where you could do a walkthrough, talk through of the steps an inexperienced person who is out in the woods solo on a hike or ATV ride has something go wrong, like an injury or gets lost. Said person has prepared themselves with a small pack. So we have fire starting tools. We have cordage, first aid kit, space blanket, something to boil water, small amount of food, a multi-tool, a phone with no reception. Maybe discuss the proper mindset to get into after realizing things have gone wrong or gone south, and the steps to take in order to survive until rescue can find them. Anything extra that should be carried outside the above mentioned kit. Thank you very much. And this did come from one of our followers there, like I said, from the YouTube side of things, and I did get them to bounce back over and basically shoot us some private messages there. That way it wasn't shared in the YouTube comments. But in any case, I think we have a pretty good setup there, Ben. Like we kind of quickly went through it. And honestly, we got enough stuff. I think we're going to be okay, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think we'll be pretty fine. You know, I see there we have shelter, way to boil water. We're in the woods, so we know there's food somewhere. We have to find it, but that's okay. I think the very first mindset, I think we've talked about this before, is the second you realize you're lost, stop.
Yeah, and we've said that in the past before, and that is a step that is vastly overlooked. And we've said this in the past as well. And Ben, you're going to have a lot to input on this, I assume, because of your experience with search and rescue. But the mindset that most people get into is, oh, I'm lost, but there must be something just around the bend, or just over that hill, or just around that tree, or just behind that rock. And a lot of people have a tendency to just keep pushing themselves, and they get further and further and further into trouble. At least that's what I've always been told, Ben. What's your insight on this? From somebody that comes from a search and rescue background, obviously, you have a pretty good insight into this.
Yeah, so somebody who gets lost and realizes they're lost and they start to panic, they'll eventually come to the conclusion they know how to get out, and they just have to go in this one direction, and they will go, regardless of what they find, in that direction until they get stopped. And so what has happened is people have crossed roads, they've crossed power lines, they've crossed streams, looking for the way home. And they'll convince themselves they're going the right way. They won't even realize it. They don't notice the roads. They get. So, if you can stop, take the few minutes, and just stop and think about it. And one of the things, of course, is, where am I to? Why am I there? What time is it? Is it going to get dark? Does anyone know where I'm to? Or approximately where I'm to? It's much better to stay still. If somebody's going to come looking for you, stay still. It could be an hour, it could be a day, could be maybe a day and a half, but somebody's probably going to find you. That being said,
absolutely. And I guess the big thing in all this that I was just kind of reading over it again is, here's a question for you, Ben, just for our scenario here. Did we tell somebody we're going out? Let's assume we're riding on an ATV. This is something that's very easily for people in rural areas. You get going, ATV breaks down, you're not 100% sure where you to. You know what I mean? Or better yet, the ATV doesn't break down. You just don't have a clue where you're at. You know what I mean? You got turned around. You don't have any maps. Things aren't looking familiar. You tried backtracking a little bit already. Nothing's looking familiar again. the first question I would ask myself is, did I tell somebody where I was going? Did I tell somebody I was going out? These are all things, anytime you're going out into the woods, you definitely should let someone know when to expect you back, if nothing else, and the general vicinity where you're going. And this is something that both you and I practice like 100% of the time. I know I do anyway, and I'm very sure you do. Even if it's just a quick, as I'm going by Melissa on my way out, hey Mel, I'm heading into the woods, I'm going I should be in this area. And literally the last words out of my mouth are, if I'm not back by X amount of time, something went wrong, send help.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do something fairly similar. The other thing that I now generally carry with me, and this isn't listed on the thing, is I do carry my InReach when I go. So I have the motorcycle that I've been doing trips on, and so I generally do have a way of getting hold of someone. But say it gets lost or whatever, what do I do? What if it fails? I mean, these, nothing's foolproof. I will generally stay still. I will stay relatively still and set up a base. Now, that being said, sometimes right where you realize you're lost may not be the most ideal location. You may have to move a little bit to get somewhere a little bit more secure, a little bit more safe. But as soon as you can, choose a safe location and set up. When you're choosing your location, try to choose a location that, how do I put this? It makes you more visible. So if it's near a road, stay near the road. If it's in the woods and you see a clearing, aim for the clearing. If there's planes or something going over top looking for you, they're going to see you. But if you're huddled up underneath a pine tree, maybe you're not going to get found. You know what I mean? Like, there's...
No, absolutely. And the first thing I thought about in our scenario here is, if you're lost on a trail, don't go off the trail. Don't, and this is the number one thing. I've seen people do it. I've been in the situation where people have said this. If I just walk through the woods here, I should hit whatever, a road, a power line, a river, whatever, but it's completely unknown. They're just guessing. And honestly, it might be there, or you might be walking further into the woods. You are far better off to stay put. And if you're on that trail, stay close to the trail, like Ben said. If they're going to send rescue, in this scenario, we're on an ATV, we went for a drive, they're probably going to send people on ATVs to scout these trails, you know what I mean? Or they're going to start talking to other people that are on the trails or something like that. If you are supposed to be on a trail, the worst thing you can do is walk off the trail, you know what I mean? Because now, where are you in the woods? Especially if you take your bike into the woods. And I've seen this too, people are just like, I can get my bike out through here, and off they go. If for whatever reason, and Ben, weigh in on this for me, please, bud. If you need to leave the trail, you're better off to leave a marker where you left that trail. Leave your ATV. Like Ben said, if you're going for a more secure spot to set up for whatever reason, leave the ATV so they have a point of reference to where to start looking for you. Ideally, and I know you're a big advocate for this one, Ben, you should have some flagging tape on you, and you can literally flag a trail to where you are going to be. Or write a message on your ATV, like literally black permanent marker, write it on the side of your bike. I am in this direction. Whatever you really need to do to let people know where you are to. Because you're obviously not with your bike and you're not on the trail anymore.
So if I have a first aid kit, chances are these are things that are in my first aid kit. I'll throw some, red trailblazing tape, or whatever you want to call it, flagging tape, and a small Sharpie pen. Comes in extremely handy. And you can put your name, your date on it, and any little piece of information you want. Don't want to write a book on it. Me, Ben, February, March, whatever, date, and just, if they come along and they find my bike and then they find my tape and it's dated within the last couple of days, they're like, oh, Ben was here. And now they're going to look, and they're not going to go elsewhere. They will concentrate in that area. And this is why it's important you don't go. If you decide to walk, somebody in a panic could probably cover up to 7 kilometers an hour relatively easily.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not out of the realm of possibilities.
No.
On the flagging tape, the only other thing I would include in there, if you're able to, would be time. Yeah. You don't necessarily have to put it in an exact time, like I was here at 10:23 a.m. Even if you can just put morning, noon-ish, or evening. If somebody stumbles upon it and it's like, oh, that was today, this evening, and it's already evening, they know you're not far.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if it was like yesterday morning, well, now roughly they've had 2 days, an average person traveling, let's say 5 kilometers an hour times, let's assume they're walking 10 hours a day. Potentially, they could be a good, now you got like what would that be? 100-kilometer circle, Ben, something like that, depending on which direction you went?
Oh,
No, it'll be way less than that, but you know what I mean.
Well, your diameter grows by, say, if you want to go a little conservative, 3 to 4 kilometers per hour. But 3 to 4 kilometers per hour is a circle. That's become radius. That's a pretty big area, and you're only taking up 1 or 2 square feet when you're standing. 2 by 6 when you're laying down. That's not a big thing in that area. So you're literally looking for a needle in a haystack. So the smaller you can keep that area, the better. Keep an ear out if you're lost, in case anyone's calling your name or whatnot. And
don't put your headphones in and listen to your music. That's a bad thing.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you have no reception, turn your phone off.
Yeah, save the battery, 100%.
Right.
Or at least put it in airplane mode. If you have that, my phone has to be on so I can check to see if I have reception kind of mode. But honestly, you're better off to turn it off, as Ben said. Check it every 30 minutes to an hour is what I would do, honestly. And if you suddenly get reception, good, make your phone call.
Yeah.
Load up your GPS, whatever. But just leaving it on, you're just burning that battery.
Yeah. Especially if it's searching for signal, it seems to burn battery a little faster. So that's what I would highly suggest. Minimize, airplane mode, battery saver mode. If you want, put it full power off, and then turn it on. Like you said, every hour, every couple hours, at very least when you wake up and just before you go to sleep, and anytime you're near higher altitudes. So yeah, with this, we've decided that we are lost. We are not going very far.
Sorry, just grabbing a drink of water.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not, if you are lost, the big thing, first and foremost, kind of looping back to the start and getting us back here, is you got to recognize and accept you're lost. A lot of people don't want to accept they're lost either. You know what I mean? Oh no, I can't be lost. Well, just admit it to yourself. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure where I'm to. Ideally, we set up camp. We stay put. People are going to look close to where they last know we were going to be. We have a good package of stuff here with us. We can make a small fire if we need to, providing the ATV still has a little gas in it. Most ATVs have that vent line that's coming off it. You can pop that off. Literally just a couple drops makes you a great fire starter. I would not suggest dumping half your tank onto the floor and trying to light that up. You're going to get a very explosive surprise. But you can use a couple drops of it if you truly need to, depending on the situation. If it's damp or something like that, use what you have available to you. People have started fires literally using the gasoline out of their tank and a spark off the spark plug. I've seen it done. I haven't done it, but I have seen it done.
Vic Roy just pointed out something too. If you want, use colored tags. We've used purple, blue, red, and orange fairly commonly. Yeah, those work. Especially if you're doing that, make sure that the person that's your contact point knows what colors you are, and they'll let searchers know. It also helps to let searchers know what you were wearing. So if you leave, make sure that the people you're leaving in charge of looking for you know kind of what you're dressed as, what type of bike you're running. These little things are useful. If they find your hat or your gloves or your jacket and they have an idea that he was wearing an Adidas jacket, and they find an Adidas jacket, that's going to tell them that there's a really good chance that's the right jacket, there's the right person, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the more information you can give, the better you are going to be. But as we said, there is limited room. You know what I mean?
But this is just stuff that, like, before I leave, my wife knows what I'm driving. She generally knows the type of clothes I'm wearing. She'll have a fairly good idea of what to report. And that's generally who's going to report on me. Yeah, so now that we've decided, and I think this is it, we've decided we aren't going much further. We're going to settle down. Let's look at the gear we had. We had a first aid kit with a blanket. We had a multi-tool.
We have a container to boil water. We have a small amount of water and food already with us, so we're not starving, obviously. And the rule of
threes.
The rule of threes. You can roughly go 3 days without what is it? 3 minutes without shelter in adverse conditions, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. And that's not like you're going to be in great shape in 3 days without water. You're basically going to be holding on. You know what I mean? So I guess in this situation where I have a little bit of water and everything is good, it wouldn't be a top priority for me, but it would still be lingering in the back of my mind, especially where I have something where I can boil some water. You know what I mean?
So the first thing I would do is the shelter. I think the number is actually 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without adequate shelter, and that can increase or decrease with environment. If you fall in the water and get wet, that time goes down. If it's a snowstorm, or if it's raining, or these things are all adverse, if it's a beautiful day, you could be out for 12, 16 hours and be fine. If it's a warm night, you don't even need a blanket. That being said, shelter gives you quite a sense of security, especially with, you're going to hear animal noises. You are going to be a little panicked. You are alone and scared, whether you want to admit it. No, some people are manlier than us and won't, but we don't care. We're going to admit we get scared. So I would start at my shelter, and with the gear we got, I would think something like a debris shelter, but I would put the reflective blanket, personally, down and then put my debris on top of that. That's going to give me a little bit of wiggle room to get in. And my body heat will reflect off that. I'll have a little bit of room to move around. I will be quite comfortable. And that's probably the system I would go with. That's something I can crawl in and out of. And if I can find something to use as a bit of a door, I can pretty well stay there for easily sleep the night.
Oh, absolutely. I might take a slightly different approach than this, Ben. Just not 100% different, but slightly different. I might go for more of a lean-to shelter, so I would be out and have a little bit more sound. And depending on the temperature, of course, I might be more apt to take that space blanket and put on the outside of the shelter, so it can be seen from outside a little bit more as a reflector. Once again, depending on how cold is it. Is it raining? Is it not raining? Like, if it's pouring rain and cold, it's coming in with me. I'm number one, you know what I mean? I gotta stay dry, I gotta stay warm. If it's okay, warm-wise, like I said, I may move that to the outside. If it's light rain, it's still gonna shut it off. It's still gonna get seen from the outside. Just a different thought process. I wouldn't say either one is more right or wrong. You're gonna have to make a decision in the moment. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's a ton of factors that could come into play on this.
Yeah. The end result is you want to keep yourself dry, so if it is raining, whatever, that blanket can definitely act as a protection against that, and sheet anything that gets onto the shelter either off, or if it gets under, go through. It also, that layer of debris forms an insulating layer that's going to heat up quite well, and you're going to be quite comfortable. And I think when you get a little over a foot, even a heavy rain generally won't soak through it.
No, and that's the beauty of that stuff, right? And it, once again, comes down to how much time do you got, how many resources do you have. But I mean, if you're staying put, your shelter is always something that can be worked on to pass time. Yeah. Boredom tends to let panic creep in. So if you can have a decent plan and have a goal in mind of what you want to accomplish, of course, first night, get yourself comfortable. You want to stay dry, you want to stay warm. Then maybe as time goes on, maybe you want a little bit more room in your shelter. Maybe you'd like to be able to sit up so you can prepare a little bit of food or whatever, so you can expand your shelter out. Or maybe you want to add more insulation to it so it's warmer. You don't need so much of a fire. These are all things you can keep yourself busy with, just literally to occupy your mind.
Yeah. So I think once you have that set up, and this is kind of the thing, is you have a shelter, you are comfortable, you are safe, you've kind of created a home base. It is okay to create slightly larger circles around your shelter to see what other resources you can find. And man, the human race, being a completely wasteful race, there is generally quite a few things, garbage and stuff, that you can pick up. So you never know what supplies and resources you'll get from that alone. But yeah, you'll be looking for a clean source of water, any type of food, berries, edible plants, mushrooms, if you're comfortable with foraging for mushrooms. And same thing with berries too. If you're not comfortable with the berries, be very apprehensive of putting anything in your mouth you're not absolutely sure on. But yeah, as you expand that, you could find a little bit of food. That'll keep you occupied. And take the time to sort of mark things. An old trick, it's not well liked today, but if it's life or death, is cutting a section of bark off a tree. We used to flag that. We used to strip probably 3 inches wide and probably 8-9 inches long on the side of a tree, and sometimes we turned a piece of bark over and put it in and make a cross, so it was obvious you did it on purpose.
We used to call it blazing trails.
Yeah.
And I mean, that means something completely different when it comes to the Old West and stuff like that. But we literally had like line crews here at Natural Resources when I first started. And that's basically what we did. We went in and blazed trails on Crown land. And exactly like you said, we would take an axe, scrape the bark down so that it would make a clear indication where the line was. Generally not great for a tree, folks. As Ben said, it's generally frowned upon. But with softwoods and stuff like that, they're pretty resilient. They'll heal up over that to a degree. But I mean, I can go back to blazes I've set, when did I start working with Natural Resources? Like 2005-ish. And I bet you they're still there. They're going to be up higher, obviously. Trees growing a little bit. But they never really fully heal up, and that's why we try not to do it as much. It is going to kill the tree. But like Ben said, life or death situation, not so much worried about the tree. Once I get home, get warmed up, get healthy, I'll go buy a flat of trees and go plant some.
One of the things too is, and keep this in mind, if the person looking for you is also a bushcrafter or at least a woodsman, he's going to be able to recognize pretty quickly how long that tree's been cut. I think I could probably get it down to within a few hours sometimes. I can tell if it's fresh. I can tell if it's a few hours. I can tell if it's a few days. I can get a pretty good idea when I see a blazed trail how long that was been blazed. So that'll help.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple comments here, Nomad. I would suggest checking out the area around before picking a shelter location or building one, because you never know what you will find. And we did briefly chat on that, but it's a good point. We might as well come back to it.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely just don't set up in the first place. You've said this in the past, Ben, so I'm going to let you describe this, where you walk off in a distance so many feet, kind of circling and get an lay of the area. So can you describe that process again, please?
Yep. So this works really good if you have a compass. And if you have a compass and you still don't know where you're to and you want to get found, or you want to expand your safe area, take something that's fairly bright. So if you have your reflective blanket, that's a really good thing. If you have a bright hat, hang it up near your base. So make sure your base is as visible as possible. This is important for you and anyone looking for you. Take your compass, point it north. Walk 100 feet or 100 steps. Look around the whole time. Do you see anything? Nope. Go south till you hit your target area again. And then you can try to go east, west, and then south. And then you can do each direction the same way. And that increases your area. And you can do this as often as you want. So you can start with 100 feet, then you can move up to 200 feet, to 300 feet, to 600 feet, and expand your area. And potentially what you'll do is you'll come across your old trail where you got lost, or maybe a road or something that's going to help you, and it gets you out there. But it prevents you from getting more lost. It prevents you from going miles and miles away without anything. And while you're doing that, it never hurts to kind of, again, mark that a little bit. Be clear with what you're doing. It can be as little as laying sticks on the ground, something that you can follow, and so that if you ever get turned around again, you know that these are all going to be pointing back towards your base, then you can get back. So it's easy to scratch an arrow in the ground and always scratch it so it points towards your camp, and then everything just goes back to your camp. If somebody comes across it and they see an arrow, people are pretty, we're pretty simple, but we're pretty smart this way. We will follow an arrow.
Most people will, yeah, in all honesty. And I mean, it sounds a little goofy, but it's 100% right.
Oh, look, it's
And the next comment we have here, Red Bear Tactical, I'm always amazed at the things I found in the woods that will help you survive a situation. Years ago, while on a survival exercise with cadets, a cadet found a parachute which you made a shelter with. And this is the other thing. You never know what you're going to find in your local vicinity, which you started talking about there, Ben. The stuff you can find out in the woods, if you didn't have a container. You tell me where you haven't walked in the woods and found a bottle, a pop can, beer can, whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? We have a multi-tool. You can cut the top off that. You may be able to use that to cook a little bit of food, boil some water. A container goes a long way, or just use it as a container for gathering stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? It goes a long way.
Oh, man. Plastic containers are good for cordage, for just regular containers. There's so much you can do. Glass you can use for a ton of things. I mean, you can, if you're lucky, even be able to use it as a bit of a magnifying glass and start a fire if you ever had to. So there's so much stuff you can do, and 100% agree with you. Looking in the area and finding what you can find. Yeah, and marking makes it bigger area for everyone to find. That's what we mean with the arrows and stuff, right?
Exactly, because now instead of trying to take up that 2 feet of square room, as Ben had said, now all of a sudden if you're 100 feet in each direction, you've got a 200-foot circle. You know what I mean? 200-foot diameter circle. That's way easier to find for people. They may walk through and be like, well, this is odd. You know what I mean? And then they start narrowing the search and coming into it. And yeah, you never know what you're going to find. You may find a better location for setting up your shelter. You may find something that's already half set up, like a nice deadfall that's already covered in the back. You already got the basics of a lean-to. Save as much energy as you can. Don't waste it needlessly. But also don't sit idly by. You kind of got to balance those things out, because like I said, idle hands are the devil's playthings. Idle minds tend to let panic set in. We don't want panic to set in. At all times, we want to remain as calm as possible. Panicked people do weird things. Like Ben said, there has been cases where people that have been panicked or anxious or whatever have literally walked straight across a power line or a road or a set of train tracks or whatever, because they got in that mindset, I just got to keep going.
Yeah. And the next thing, firewood. There is no such thing as too much firewood. So if you're out there and you're expecting to be there for a few hours or a few days, just start gathering up any standing dead, pile it up. Worst case scenario, when the search and rescue people find you and you've got a shelter and a fireplace, a fire going, and a pile of firewood and maybe a little store of food, they're going to be like, man, this guy was comfortable. I wasn't on it, but when I was in the search and rescue, Gilbert, the head of our group, he used to tell a story of a hunter they went looking for. He was in rabbit hunting, and he wasn't lost, but it got dark, and he decided that he wasn't coming home out of it. He was going to spend a night, and he would come back the next morning. He was, I believe, an elderly gentleman. Anyways, Gilbert said when he found him, the guy was set. Like, he had a camp set up. He was comfortable. Gilbert almost wanted to, he said, I wanted to stay. I was going to say, like, hey, guys, you guys go home. We're just, me and this guy, we're just going to hang for the night. We'll be out in the morning.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I bet you stayed calm too. Well, obviously he wasn't lost, like he said, but I mean, staying calm, you get a lot more accomplished. Because if you're panicked, you second guess yourself a lot. Panic just helps in no way, shape, or form. I can't stress that enough. I think the old program was hug a tree. Is that the one they used to teach kids through search and rescue, Ben?
Yep.
And basically it was hug a tree, stay put, keep calm.
Yep. Yeah, we used to give out plastic garbage bags, big orange ones, and we used to tell them, wrap yourself in that, which made you nice and bright and kept the water and wind off of you, and find a large tree and just stay there. And you would be fairly visible, and somebody would eventually come get you. That's the plan anyways.
Another thing I'd like to throw out there as a general rule of thumb, don't take any unnecessary risks, especially if you are lost. It's bad enough when you're in the woods if you take unnecessary risks. Now you injure yourself, it ruins the trip, or you have a hard time getting out. But if you don't know where you're to, and you take unnecessary risks and you get yourself injured, now you're rolling, 2 dice. One, is somebody coming to look for you, and two, are they going to find you before things get worse? You know what I mean? Like a twisted ankle is one thing. But let's say you were just hacking away at something all willy-nilly with an axe and you slip and hit your shin. Now you're into an even worse situation and nobody knows where you're at and you can't get yourself out.
And
so don't take...
This reminds me of the Bear Grylls episodes, and I always cringed watching them. I do like the guy for some stuff, but generally I think follow him with a lot of caution. He used to grab trees and swing down from hills, and he'd found old rope in the woods, and he would rappel down hills with it. And don't do this, people. Like, if you're not 100% sure that the rope is strong enough, or the tree is going to hold your weight, and take the safe route. Take your time. If it's going to take an extra hour, you're lost. You're going to be a while anyways. Don't rush.
I got one from the other side of this, which kind of opened my eyes a little bit. Wes Shroud, who is, the opposite anchor of Bear Grylls, if we're going to go into this. He did an episode where he just faked an arm injury. And his plan was, okay, and if anybody doesn't know who Wes Shroud is, he was Survivor Man, obviously. He would go out and he'd try to survive 7 days.
That was the plane crash, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a plane crash, and it was in the snow, and he had lots of resources and stuff like that. He had more resources than normal. He had the plane, he had an axe, he had a few other things. But anyway, he slung his arm up. It was just slung, and he was like, I'm going to do this episode as if I had an arm injury. And I think it was only the second day. He was like, yeah, I gave up on that immediately. It was just way too hard. It made so many other complications. I thought it was not going to be as big of a deal as it was. And that episode was like, holy crap, this is a guy that does this for a living and is straight up saying, like, just an arm, which is one thing because you're still mobile. You can still move around. Yes, you can't do as much with your arms, but you're mobile. To me, that's important. And he was like, yeah, just no. The difficulty became too much. I was worried that I was actually not going to make it through. So just keep that mentality in mind. This is a trained survival specialist, and he's straight up being like, no way, dude.
Oh, man. And any hindrance you have that's over and above what you have to do is going to be rough. And, a twisted ankle, an injured arm, you're going to burn a lot more energy. Because of the injury and because of the extra work you have to go into it, it's going to be more exhausting. You're already in a trying position. So, yeah, putting yourself in a bad position, or from a bad position to a worse one by putting yourself at risk, definitely not a good idea. We do practice and preach caution, not taking the excessive risks. That being said, there's lots you can do without taking excessive risks. And if you think it's dangerous, stop, see if there's another way. Generally, there is. Figure it out.
And here's a good one that a lot of people overlook. They're just like, well, I'll split wood. That'll keep me busy. Absolutely. However, there's a way you can do it that's significantly less risky. A lot of us, we like to stand the block up on end. Then we take our axe, and if the block is sitting here, and I don't know what you guys can see because I don't have a very good setup here, but if this is your block, we just tend to swing down onto it. And you know what? If that glances off, it can come down, go out, into your legs, whatever. If you get down on your knees, and this is going to sound ridiculous, get a little closer down to your work area and lay that log down sideways and hit it like this, you have now reduced that deflection radius or area, whatever you want to call it, significantly. Because now instead of deflecting and coming down potentially, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, it's only glancing off maybe 6 to 8 inches. Chances are you're not going to be able to swing around and come back and hit yourself somewhere else. It's not going to come down into your thighs because the handle, hopefully on your axe, is going to keep that out far enough from you. It's going to glance down, go into the ground. Yeah, you may dull your axe, but it's better than now having to treat, some sort of axe gouge.
100%. And the theory behind that, just so everyone knows, is your arms and axe are a certain length, and if you're swinging out at a full length, and you're on your knees, there's no way it can hit you. But if you're standing up and you miss, it can come back and it can hit you right in the shin or the leg, and that's a very serious injury. People on shows like Alone got sent home for less, or for the same. So, very serious and never worth the risk. There's a lot of methods to really minimize risk with things like axes and saws, and learning to use your tools is obviously a really important part of that. This guy.
And that's a good point there too from Nomad.
Yes.
Also with dead wood, if you can find a forked tree, you can break down a lot of wood without an axe. And I do this even when I have an axe and saw. We did it at the waterfall. There is a perfect crotch tree there. Yeah. You just put it in where you want, use your body weight and leverage and break it. Takes significantly less calories to do it, and there's basically zero risk of injury. Maybe a splinter, but You know what I mean? Once it gets down a little shorter and you're putting a whole bunch of pressure into it, all right, now you're back to there may be another way to do it. But when it's long and basically you just push it with one arm, it is the best way to break wood in my mind.
Oh, yeah. And there's a certain deadness it needs to be. So keep that in mind. But yeah, no, you'll know it too. When you feel it, you'll know that, oh, this is brittle. This will crack and not bend.
Absolutely. And Danny over here, Red Sand Adventures, there's my redneck coming out, Red Sand Adventures. He actually tried the splitting method, and it works well, found it easier on his back. And you know what? This isn't just for survival situations. I am guilty for standing stuff up and splitting it. If I'm starting to get fatigued, I drop to my knees and I split wood that way because I know the fatigue is going to set in. The chance of glancing and stuff like that increases as you fatigue. So once again, just because, oh yeah, I should be able to do this, if you're tired, that changes things too. You got to take every angle into account for your well-being, if that makes any kind of sense. Did I describe that right, Ben, or am I just rambling here?
You definitely got it. And the thing, keep in mind, the shorter the axe, the more important it is to do that. If you have a hatchet, definitely get on your knees. If you got a full woods axe, 27-inch handle on that thing, then you can be, or a splitting axe, you definitely can stand because they're designed for that. But yeah, I mean, chances are if you're lost like this, you don't have those tools. Many more people would have something like, and I'm sure I have a couple here.
And I'm just looking at the kit here, and the only other thing I'd throw into the stuff that they kind of gave us is anytime I go out in an ATV or I go into an area where I'm not familiar with, I definitely have a compass or a GPS. And it's the only thing I don't see mentioned here. I think actually going into the woods in Nova Scotia, at least, one of the requirements I know during hunting season is you have a compass and you can show how to use it, some sort of cutting tool, and some sort of fire-making device, as well as a whistle or signaling device.
Yep. That's under the hunting regulations. It's the only place they can get you. If you're not hunting, they can't insist on you having that. But
it's still not a bad practice.
No. if they were to propose everyone who goes into woods have those items, I would be, yeah, let's do it. If everyone had a knife into woods and they knew how to use it, I think that's important. The same thing as the compass. That's really good. If you have your phone and there is power, it is powerful, it should have a working GPS too. So you can generally tell where you're to. If you have a working phone, you can tell how far away it is. And it will give you, like if you turn, you can see you're looking one way or the other. That being said, if you're far enough back, that may not matter. And again, you're going to stay still. But yeah. If you get to that...
sorry, go ahead.
If you do get to that point, then you can definitely try to walk it with the GPS. But realize if your battery's low, it may not last to get you out, and then you're putting yourself in a worse position.
Exactly. Everything is kind of a weighing between risk and reward. Is the reward worth the risk? And how bad is that risk going to affect down the road? Because it's not just, it's just today. It might be 72 hours, you know what I mean? Maybe it's going to be 4 days. Maybe it'll be 5 days. Hopefully it's not that long. I think search and rescue, once the person's reported, most people are found within 3 days. Ben?
Yeah, we stopped looking.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Most people are either found within 3 days or it becomes more of a recovery operation. Not saying that you can't be found after that time, then they start looking at other options.
People have definitely been found after that. The problem generally gets to, and it's a hard pill for some people to swallow, but it's time and resources versus payoff. So if you're lost for 3 days, unless somebody's finding some pretty good evidence that you're still alive, they will tend to stop looking. So that's what the police, the search and rescue, the authorities that are involved, they're going to look at it. They're going to look at, there's a whole book on this, and it breaks it down, but they're going to look at your age, your gender, your activity, all these things, and they're going to figure out most likely where you're to and how long you're liable to survive. And that's the guidelines they'll go with. And
absolutely. They're going to look longer for somebody that's young, fit, and in shape and has good outdoor knowledge than they are with somebody that might be older, out of shape, and doesn't go in the woods often. Which sounds ridiculous, but it's true.
Yeah, well, they figure that a competent woodsman is more likely to survive. And there's always been exceptions. There was an 80-year-old woman found a little while ago that I think she was out for like 24 hours with dementia in a snowstorm. And they found her perfectly fine. These things happen. So you can't count.
It's just not the norm.
Can't count anyone out. You should never count anyone out. But they do have to look at it like search and rescue in Nova Scotia and much of Canada is a volunteer operation. And these people are oftentimes taking time off of work, using their vacation days, using whatever they can to continue the search. And at some point, the government says, this is enough. We're going to lose their searchers anyways, and they stop.
And that's the thing. Other provinces, they do got SARTechs, which is search and rescue technicians, where it is their job, and they'll have a few more resources available to them. But yeah, rural areas like this, ground search and rescue is an entirely volunteer situation. It's much like the fire service here. 90% of the fire service in Nova Scotia is volunteer. There's very few paid fire departments outside like the HRM area. Much like search and rescue. I don't think there's any paid search and rescue in Nova Scotia. Has there been? Maybe the higher ups to run and coordinate stuff, but the actual, feet on the ground, I think they're all exclusively volunteer, are they not?
Yeah, the only part of search and rescue is not ground search and rescue, it is search and rescue, is your Cormorant helicopters and like the Coast Guard type people. Those guys will continue looking for you a bit longer potentially. But again, they're not keeping a helicopter up in the air if they have no reason to suspect that you're truly there. So searches I've been on, and they've searched and searched and hadn't found any additional evidence. The question has often been, are they still in the area? Were they in the area when we even started? There has been times when they found like a car, we looked around and never found it. Maybe somebody picked them up. Maybe they walked home. Maybe, we don't know. But we searched the area as much as we could and never did find them. So it happens.
And that leads us back to staying put is the best option. So kind of quickly running through here, because I know we're coming up on 44 minutes now. We said we're going to stay put. We're going to try and get some shelter. We don't really need to worry about the water and food as of yet because we have a small supply with us, and we're hoping that we're going to get found within the next 3 days because we told somebody where we were to when we went out or where we should be. We also told them when we should be coming home. So if we didn't come home that night, our significant other goes, it's odd. Robert didn't come back at 6 like he said he should. Maybe I'll give it till 7 because I imagine Melissa would give me an hour of flex, which is fine because, crap happens. But then probably around like 8 o'clock, Nell's going to start being like, all right, something's wrong. We got to get, it's time to activate or whatever you want to say. And she's going to start getting things moving, I hope. Ideally, maybe she's going to be like, oh, good, he's finally gone. That's the other thing. Don't make people mad when you tell them when you're going to go, because maybe they'll just forget to report it.
They won't forget to call the insurance company, though.
But yeah, no, realistically, the best thing you can do, like an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. Tell people where you're going. Tell them when you should be back. Even if they give you a little wiggle room, at least they're going to know something's up, Yeah, I should be home at 6 o'clock. And I always give myself a buffer. I tell Mel, like, if I'm planning to be home at 5 o'clock, I don't say, I should be home at 5. I tell her I should be home no later than 6. That's already my hour buffer in there, you know what I mean? And then assuming she gives me another hour buffer, that's 2 hours of buffer, that's more than enough time. You know what I mean? At that point, I would assume Melissa would be on the phone going, okay, look, folks, I don't know where Robert is, but he's not home. This is where he was going to. We need to get some people out there and see if we can figure out if the bike rolled over, if he fell in a hole, or just he's fallen and can't get up.
Yeah. Red Bear Tactical talked about using a good knife for batoning. This here, which I'm flashing around like a crazy man, more a knife, a companion. We've talked about them in the past. You can definitely baton with one of these, but a full shank is a little better. Be careful. Have you seen the trick where you stop using the knife, the hammer on, and you turn it upside down, and you hammer the wood down on top of it?
I do this when I'm splitting wood, and a lot of people with an axe, like everybody hits the cutting side down, and then most people will remove the axe out of the wood, take another swing. If the stick is small enough, I just flip the axe around, hit the back of the axe on my splitting blocks, drive the wood down through it. Much is the option here, and it saves a lot of effort, honestly.
Yeah. So one of the issues you kind of get is the knife gets so far in the wood you can only hit the tip. So if you turn it over and you put that tip against something and hit the back of the wood, you got a better area to hit on. You're not aiming for this tiny area, and it's a bit more secure. So just things like that. Maintaining a good fire is an amazing signal device for signalers. Screen boughs in the day for smoke and dry wood for big flames at night. Exactly. Honestly, there's not much that beats a good fire. It's going to keep you safe, it's going to keep you comfortable, and it's going to attract people. Any aircraft,
and it obviously adds a little companionship.
Yeah. Any aircraft that's searching for you and sees smoke, they're going to send people there or check it out themselves. Even ground searchers will see smoke for a ways away and head towards it. And they'll report it. Like every one of those guys have a radio, and they're talking to head base, and they're going to say, I see or smell smoke, and they'll generally have someone check it out. It may not be the people that see it, so you may even be able to kind of see people off in a distance, but not be able to contact them. That doesn't mean they haven't told someone that they've seen your fire or your smoke, and that you're not on that search path, right? Somebody's probably heading your way.
So, last thoughts on this, or where I want to go with this. Like I said, some of the other stuff that's in here is just going to add to the enabling of us to be comfortable. So we talked about starting a fire. We have some cordage which can lead to some shelter building and stuff like that. First aid kit in case we get some basic injuries. Space blanket, which we could use as a signaling device or part of our shelter. Container to boil water or cook in. So we do have a water source nearby and we start guzzling water for whatever reason. We can, clear some up. And this is something I hear a lot of people ask is, should you ration water? And the consensus is no. Just drink the water. Because if you're half dehydrated for 3 days, it's almost as bad, if not worse, than being dehydrated for a day. You know what I mean? And then the multi-tool, once again, I can add and aid into some of that stuff. Phone, no reception right now, so not much use. So what is some of the universal signals for help? And maybe common knowledge, may not be common knowledge. Anything in threes is basically the general rule of in distress. So 3 shots of a rifle, fairly close together. 3 piles of rocks. 3 fires. 3 of anything generally is supposed to be the universal distress signal. Am I correct with that, Ben?
Yep.
That's what I've always believed.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so, especially hunters, they'll oftentimes make sure they keep three bullets left in case they have to signal.
2 for you and 1 for me, man.
Wow. Yeah, so, that's kind of it. Like, don't try to find your own way out. Now, if you're in, like you said, we've hit 3 days and still no one's come for you, it may be time that you really have to consider some alternative ideas. And this is when we get back to the expanding circle and try to find it. If you've saved enough battery life on your phone, see if you can figure out the closest landmark is that would bring you to safety. Obviously, roads, power lines, and water are the 3 I would look for. If you get the shoreline and walk ashore, you're eventually going to hit a town or a road or something. The only thing with that is walking shorelines can be dangerous and you have tides. But it will work. Just you have to be careful with that, and that could still be a day or two's trip. Ideally, you want to get yourself to a actual highway. That means there's probably people going up those roads probably at least once an hour.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess when it comes to this scenario, hopefully the conclusion is somebody finds us. So I guess the last question that we should address a little bit, Ben, is how long do you wait until you should start changing tactics? And I think this is a loaded question, but I know it's going to be asked, so let's touch it a little bit, I guess.
It's a hard decision. You have to look at how long you can safely stay where you're to. If you have enough firewood and you still have food and water, I would probably stick it out a bit. But at some point, you realize your health is at risk. The weather is going to be an issue, or you simply realize no one's coming to look for you. If those things have happened and you realize you have to, then you have to make that call. I would definitely well mark the area I was to in case somebody comes across it after. People have had their sites found years later, and there's been people who left phones and notebooks and stuff, and there's whole stories that were left with people who stayed in place for days and never got found. The one example I can think of, I think, was on the Appalachian Trail, and I think her nickname was Inchworm.
Was she the one that just went off the trail like 15, 20 feet or what she thought and just got lost?
Yeah. They found her, I think she was only a few hundred yards away from the trail. And I think they said had she just gone a few hundred more feet in almost any direction, she would have eventually found her way out. Or at least in one direction. There was a road not far from her. But she didn't know that, and she stayed still, and I think she was potentially injured, and she did perish there. And it's a very sad story, and it does. There was record that she said she heard people call her name, so that's how close rescuers were to her. So it's just something to keep in mind. There is a point where maybe you do have to.
And I guess my answer to that question is going to be when your circumstances change and it dictates you should move. So, and this is also where you set up your camp. Maybe where you stop and realize you're lost. If there's an immediate danger to your life, health, or otherwise, you're not going to stick in the area. If you set up camp and all of a sudden it's changed to the point where you could potentially be in some sort of immediate danger or potential danger, risk, or something like that, then you may have to walk. Or if you figure that the spot that you're at is just no longer viable, that may be time when you need to move. And I'm not saying just get up and move nonstop. I'm saying you just may need to relocate from the area you're in, potentially set up a new camp, regather yourself, depending on how well you were set up to begin with, and start over again. You know what I mean? And there has been stories where people have moved their base camp and set up and just kind of kept leapfrogging, if you will. Stay for a couple days and move on. Stay for a couple days and move on. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but once again, folks, there is no right answer to this. You're going to have to weigh your options as you are out there in the woods. Is it more or less beneficial to stay or go? If I stay, there's no water here. There's no food here. There's no firewood here. There's a bear roaming around. I've seen it. Maybe you don't hang around. But is it, oh, I have water right beside me. There's a blueberry patch over there. There's plenty of firewood. Don't move.
Yeah. The other thing too is, and this happens too sometimes, you're in there and in your exploring you find an actual building or a shelter. It could be a hunting camp or a trapping camp or an old ranger camp. And some of those are maintained and visited. Some of them have logbooks. You may find something like that and be able to get in. But again, there's no guarantee that somebody will be by for days or weeks. But you know, that's a location where you can potentially get more resources. There may even be options for charging phones. And there may even be some instructions on where the nearest cell phone signal is. So I'm picturing one I had gone to in Nova Scotia. When we got in, there was previous people had left solar panels. And so you were able to charge up some lights and stuff there. You could have easily siphoned some power off of your phone. There was extra cords. And the logbook also listed that the hill behind us had good cell phone signal.
Exactly. And worst case, you're in a ready-made shelter, which hopefully doesn't leak, and probably has a heat source. I know all the camps that I've stumbled across in the woods and stuff like that, most of them had like some sort of heating device. You know what I mean? Providing the shelter was in half decent shape. Yeah. It had some sort of heating. Usually a wood stove, obviously, or at least there was some old lanterns and candles, and even a candle can go a long way in the right situation.
Yeah, the ones I visited often had Coleman stoves, Coleman lanterns, wood stoves, lighters, matches, cards, you know, a lot of stuff, candles, even food. There was cans of food and a few other things. So those are great caches of in case you're in danger. And I think as a general rule, these isolated cabins are not oftentimes locked in case someone does get lost.
And maybe you know more about this, Ben, but after you're so far in the woods, somebody told me once, and I don't know if it's true or not, you can't actually lock your cabin by law in case somebody finds it and needs respite when they're out in the woods. Yeah. And I don't know if that's true or not, folks. I encourage people to weigh in on this. It was something that was told to me when I was a kid, and it always sticks in my head. And most camps that I find in the deep woods generally aren't locked. Or if they're locked, they're not locked that well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I found would be similar, nothing. But I do know of ones that were maybe a little easier to get to, but still far in the woods, that people locked them because they were getting things stolen and stuff. Or
ransacked.
So it does depend, but yeah, I mean, if you have to break a window to get out of danger, the one thing to keep in mind, be really careful around those buildings. Sometimes people put bear traps up, nails and stuff near windows to keep bears out, and you could easily injure yourself. So if you're approaching one of these things, a little bit of caution, using a good stick to root around any leaves or debris is a pretty good idea. But yeah, it's fairly common to take a bear, I think they call it bear mat, where you take a piece of plywood and put like 15 nails up through it and just lay it beneath windows. So if a bear comes along and goes to stand up to break the window, they stand on the nails and they go away.
No, good points. Honestly, for this scenario, I know we kind of looped around some holes and stuff like that. No one mentions sound notification, whistle, knocking, fine metal, or something that will have different sound than nature. And this is why we stress taking a whistle, because if you're just shouting nonstop, you're just going to wear your voice out, honestly, and then you won't be able to respond back to rescuers. So that's, at least in the hunting situation, why they want you to have a whistle. 3 whistle blows, universal, sign of distress. If people are hollering, and even if you got a sore throat, you can blow the whistle and they're going to hear a sound, they're going to investigate it.
Yeah. The big thing with noise, and it's definitely a good method, I would probably reserve it unless you see or hear someone yourself. Simply because you can spend an awful lot of energy still just calling for help or whistling to no avail. But if you have any inkling that there might be someone in the area, definitely try the whistle, try banging a couple of logs together. It doesn't take much to make sound, but try to make sure it's useful sound, that it's actually somebody could hear it. But yeah, for sure. I think we've covered everything. Get yourself some shelter, keep yourself safe, make some fire, stick around as long as you can feasibly, slowly expand your area so you don't get any more lost. And if you find a way out, or you come to a point where you're comfortable being able to get out, then attempt it. Don't stay to the point where you know it's detrimental to your health. That's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's the Red Bear Tactical there. I think it was an unwritten rule, something that was not a law, but was a thing people generally believed that was proper. Granddad kept his cabin on Portage Lake unlocked until someone went in and ransacked it and stole his lantern and stove. And I hear this a lot too. A buddy of mine, Bruce Muirhead, he had a cabin and it was up by a lake. Beautiful spot, always was unlocked. Some kids went in, they took his axe and drove it through every window that was in the place and just literally destroyed it. And it's a shame, honestly. It happens a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in that area, I've been back to Portage Lake. Now there's cabins on either side of that, and it's really close to a road now. But when it was put back there, none of that existed. So, you know, that history has changed too. And as it became more accessible, more and more people went to it. Yeah. But yeah,
Anyway, I'm sure we can keep talking on this for ages, but I think we covered the major points here. And that is, acknowledge that you're lost. Don't move unless you have to. Take stock of what you have and see what you got and what you need. And then just try to make yourself as comfortable as possible while you wait it out.
Yeah.
I think that's best practices from my point of view. Ben, final words from Search and Rescue's point of view?
Yeah,
or from a former Search and Rescue member's point of view?
I agree 100%. And in the time it takes you to maybe set up a little bit of a camp or a shelter, you may have a moment of clarity and realize the way out much better. But this way too, like if you know it's 200 yards back the trail, you now know how to get back to you too. If you go that route and you don't find your way out, come back to that spot, right? And you've just explored a bit more of an area, but generally you're not as lost as you think you are. The only exception I really can think of is if you ended up like in a plane crash, then that could put you there. Good to see you. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, that's all I basically had for tonight. Like I said, I could talk about this for hours. This is one of the things I love to talk about, but I think we covered the major points.
I think so too. As we always say, get out there, have fun, enjoy yourself. Love to hear your trips. And we'll see you guys next week.
Night, everybody. We'll see you next week.